court.
Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, President of the Bahamas Hotel Catering and Allied Workers Union is calling on the government and the opposition to do what's necessary to keep Bahamians here at Bahamar employed.
Bahamians sign professional baseball contracts. The Bahamas tonight, the National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
After filing a bankruptcy order in a U.S. court, Bahamar now has taken its case to a Bahamian court. The company's legal matter is now before the Bahamas Supreme Court. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Saunders.
And I'm Charisma Robinson. This morning, Minister of State for Legal Affairs Damian Gomez and attorneys for Bahamar and its creditors presented their case. But one of the high points revealed is a possible resolution that could impact the short-term job status of those employees. LaDawn Davis reports.
The attorney representing Bahamar, Roy Sweeting, filed an application in the Supreme Court this morning on behalf of 15 Bahamar companies to have their stay in the United States extended here in the Bahamas. On Wednesday, a Delaware bankruptcy court allowed Bahamar to take on financing and gave leave for the company to accept $80 million in financing, $30 million of which will be made available during a 4-week period. Additionally, the extension sought by Bahamar will protect the company from any execution efforts by local creditors against the company's assets and property. Attorney Brian Sims QC told the court that there has been ongoing negotiations between the government, Bahamar, and his clients for quite some time, and that there were always options open for Bahamar to function and pay its debt. Queen's Counsel and Minister of State for Legal Affairs, the Honorable Damian Gomez, also told the court that $100 million was granted to pay the company's tax issues. Minister Gomez announced that the government will also consider paying the salaries of employees pending the provisions of a payment application by Bahamar. Now, this figure is estimated at $7.5 million. Meanwhile, Attorney Sweeting says construction at the company is about 98% completed, but the lack of funds has forced the company to discontinue. Bahamar's bankruptcy proceedings in the U.S. will head back to court in Delaware on August 3rd, but will continue in the Supreme Court here in the Bahamas on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. LaDawn Davis, ZNS Network News.
All right, Dawn, thanks a lot. As you know, this is a developing story, and we've just gotten word from Bahamar that they have released a statement saying that they are, in their words, extremely concerned and disappointed that the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has decided to adjourn until next week, Tuesday, the hearing on Bahamar's application for recognition of the U.S. bankruptcy proceedings. Now, the adjournment, in their words, was granted at the joint request of the AG and the Export-Import Bank of China, the project's lender. Now, Bahamar says this has much implications not only for the Bahamas and the company, but also far-reaching as well. They said in their statement, and this is a direct quote from them, "This adjournment unfortunately makes it, in their words, impossible at this time to act on the U.S. court approvals that they received yesterday, and that would allow them, among other things, to pay salaries and benefits for Bahamar citizens," that's their words, for their employees, as well as pay ordinary course suppliers and vendors for goods and services post the commencement of their Chapter 1 proceedings. The adjournment is, in their words, very troubling for the implications for both Chapter 11 process and their efforts to position Bahamar to complete its construction and open successfully. Again, this is a developing story, and we will follow this as it moves. Also, the government wants to ensure that those Bahamar employees are paid. The AG told our Cleopatra Murphy today why the move is necessary and why the Bahamian court must have a voice in this judicial process.
Government could pay the $7.5 million wages for nearly 2,400 Bahamar employees after the $3.5 billion Bahamar resort filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in a Delaware court Monday. Attorney General Allison Maynard Gibson said her office wrote to Bahamar Wednesday of government's position that Bahamian workers should be paid.
They should not be used as pawns in negotiations about the future of the project. The developer was also advised that in the event that Baha or the Exim Bank was unable or unwilling to pay the employees, the government will step in and make the payment for this month while negotiations continue.
Government says it was blindsided by Bahamar's filing. Maynard Gibson says her office and the government's international lawyers received the court documents from Bahamar Tuesday. Bahamar's largest creditor, the Chinese Export-Import Bank, has not yet been served. The Bahamas and the Chinese Export-Import Bank believe the matter should be heard in the Bahamian Supreme Court because of the implications for the country.
This would have serious and far-reaching implications for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as a sovereign nation. Completion and opening of the Bahama Resort are matters of paramount importance to the Bahamas. The government feels very strongly that resolution of the disputes that have delayed the project should occur in the Bahamas, subject to adjudication to the extent that they cannot be resolved consensually by Bahamian courts.
Maynard Gibson says lawyers are working to ensure Bahamian lawyers are front and center in the matter. The Attorney General says Bahamians will also be kept updated.
The government has instructed the Department of Information Technology to provide the means by which there will be access to the publicly available court documents in this matter and a briefing on court proceedings as and when they occur. This information is to be housed on the website of the Office of the Attorney General.
Questioned whether footing the bill for a private entity would set a bad precedence, Maynard Gibson said the matter is before the court. She maintains that the government is acting in the best interest of Bahamians, as Bahamar's completion is a matter of national priority. Cleopatra Murphy, ZNS Network News.
Prime Minister Christie updated the region a short time ago about the turn of events involving Bahamar. The nation's leader is in Bridgetown, Barbados for the CARICOM Heads of Government Summit.
He outlined the vulnerability that tourism and foreign investment can bring to the region through unexpected financial issues like the one facing the Bahamas. Clint Watson is traveling with the Prime Minister.
It was not the way he intended to begin his outgoing address as chairman of CARICOM at the 36th session of CARICOM here in Barbados. However, Prime Minister Christie apologized to those attending CARICOM that he would not be able to stay, citing the issues facing the Bahamas right now with the Bahamar crisis and bankruptcy. Mr. Christie says it's something his government plans on addressing.
When you visited Nassau in February, we met in an atmosphere in the Bahamas that the US $3 billion hotel project was nearing completion. Thousands of jobs were riding on that fact. Sadly, events in the last few days have caused us to pause. The developer without notice filed for bankruptcy under the laws of the United States. This really shows the complexity of our regional international relations and the international nature of our economies. In our case, it involves US bankruptcy laws, Chinese capital and construction expertise, and Bahamian assets. We are therefore now at a critical time which requires the superintendence of the government. The more general lesson for us all is that no matter how people speak of new models for development in our region, at the end of the day, the entity of last resort, the entity that must step up to the plate when all else fails, is the government. I have never shirked from that fact throughout my public life, and I pledge that in this case my government will see it through. One single large investor can, when it collapses, throw an entire country out of whack. Similarly, as we have seen in our region, one hurricane can wipe out the GDP of an entire country threefold.
In the same vein, Mr. Christie called it an honor to have served as chairman of CARICOM for the past 6 months.
I hope that my chairmanship is remembered as a time of progress for the region. The pace has been breathless and the range of issues infinite and complex. As a community, though, in the words of the poet, we have miles to go before we sleep.
Mr. Christie also had much to say about youth unemployment and other issues of suggestions for CARICOM. We'll have that in another report. But for now, in Bridgetown, Barbados, Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
President of the Bahamas Hotel Catering and Allied Workers Union says our country cannot afford for a leading resort like Baha Mar to fail. As Carla Palmer tells us, she is calling on all stakeholders to do what's necessary to get those doors open.
There is very little movement at that mega resort today after workers were sent home on Tuesday. Equipment and material outside the property seemingly remained positioned just as employees had left it. Today, Baha Mar remains on the minds of Bahamians nationwide, including Hotel Union President Nicole Martin.
It is scary. It is most unfortunate because in the first instance, you're talking about persons who would have uprooted, left their jobs, went to Baha Mar because it seemed to be something that was coming on stream relatively soon. So it's quite unfortunate that workers are being impacted.
About 2,000 workers are reportedly on Baha Mar's payroll. However, unlike their counterparts next door at the Melia property, which remains unfazed by the bankruptcy, Baha Mar employees were not unionized.
And based on everything that is happening, those workers out there will certainly need representation because our laws are not adequate to address all of the nuances that happen in the hotel industry. So I want the doors open, and the union has to do what it has to do. But first things first.
For now, Martin is mincing no words and calling for all heads of agreements within the hotel sector to be re-examined and, wherever possible, renegotiated.
I do not wish that Baha Mar is not successful in opening its doors. But I hope that we are learning that when we sit to negotiate these agreements, we must negotiate them in light of possibilities such as Chapter 11 filings, possibilities of people just uprooting and leaving the country. As we move forward, I'm hoping that any subsequent heads of agreement, and if there is a way to renegotiate the heads between Baha Mar and the government, I hope that they do that because we cannot afford to be left holding the bag.
Moving forward, Martin pledged her union's support to advancing the Baha Mar property wherever possible. Carla Palmer, ZNS Network News.
Yesterday, Baha Mar officials issued a statement saying that it got that approval for $80 million in DIP financing. DIP financing stands for Debtor in Possession and is provided for companies in financial distress, typically during restructuring under Chapter 11. Tonight, Jimenita Swain breaks down how those monies are expected to be spent.
A ruling from a bankruptcy court paved the way for Baha Mar to continue paying employee wages and other benefits. Baha Mar can also pay ordinary core suppliers and vendors for any post-petition claims and the operation of certain customer loyalty and other programs. United States bankruptcy judge Kevin Carey in that ruling approved $2.9 million for pre-petition wages, $1.5 million for employee benefits, $100,000 for reimbursable business expenses, $25,000 to cover payroll taxes, $15,000 for pre-petition payroll fees, and the sum of $1.8 million was set aside for severance payments. The order also allows the company to pay pre-petition and post-petition wages to Melia employees. Judge Carey's order states that a final hearing to consider the relief requested in the motion with respect to the balance of severance payments is set for July 20th. The amount to be doled out is $1.8 million. With this initial authorization, the future of some 2,400 employees hang in the balance. Now, these matters do have to be approved by a local court. Additionally, in order for Baha Mar to undertake the mentioned initiatives, the court approved the interim debtor in possession financing arranged by Baha Mar's developer Sarkis Ismailian. The DIP facility is up to $80 million, of which $30 million will be utilized by BAMA over the next 30 days. In court papers filed, BAMA makes it clear that the missed opening date of March 27 was, quote, devastating, end quote, for it. And at least one local company has filed a claim against BAMA in these proceedings. That creditor who filed in the bankruptcy court is John's Department Store Limited for the amount of $20,629.55. The bankruptcy court has not yet set a deadline for filing proofs of claims against the debtor, and at a later time it's expected that creditors will receive a notice by mail of the deadline to file a proof of claim. Jimenita Swain, ZNS Network News.
Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, irate beach vendors are not granted access to Cabbage Beach. We'll bring you all the details, so stay tuned.
News is brought to you by the new Shell and Lettuce, designed for extra miles.